So you want to build a multi-sided platform or a two-sided marketplace. How do you do it? That is the question that I want to answer with this set of videos. And so the first one, we'll chat about economics, how economics applies to two-sided platforms, some examples of that, and network effects. So let's talk standard economics. Let's say you run a pizza business and you can make and serve pizza for $4. So how much should you charge? And this is what supply and demand economics teaches us, is that there's a thing called the demand curve, which says that if you charge a whole lot, there's not that many people that will want it. And if you charge very little, then lots of people will want it, but you won't make much money. So say you charge $50 for your pizza, you make a little bit of money, but not many people will buy it. And the same thing for the low end. You can charge $5 per pizza, but you're not going to make much money. So what supply and demand teaches us is that there's an optimal price somewhere along this demand curve, which allows you to maximize the area of the blue square, meaning the most possible people paying the highest price such that you make the most money. But what this also means is that you can shift that demand curve outward. And so if you're focused on a single market, like a pizza business, you could have positive Yelp reviews or more people move to the neighborhood, meaning there's more demand for your pizza. And that will allow you to either continue charging the same price and get more people, or charge more and optimize again. But the same thing applies when markets shrink or demand shifts to the left, like a negative demand curve shift, meaning less people want your product and are willing to pay less. So how does this apply to two-sided markets and platforms? Well, it's that there are two separate markets that you're addressing at the same time with a two-sided marketplace. And both of these markets have a demand curve that you have to manage, and the demand curves play off of each other. So typically you would call one side of this a demand side and the other side a supply side. So let's look at a traditional marketplace. A traditional marketplace has customers and vendors. Customers who demand some sort of good or service that they're shopping for, and vendors who have a supply of things to sell. And so if you're charging access to your platform for both of these types of users, then there's going to be a demand curve which will apply to that. And as an aside, you might be thinking, well, what's the difference between a platform and a marketplace? Really, marketplaces are a type of platform, and platforms run in two main types. Either exchange-oriented, like a marketplace, or they're more infrastructure-oriented, where they host value by some other party, like the iOS App Store. And so let's look at some examples, because they're so prevalent in our society and some of the most impactful businesses that we see day to day. And so Uber is one, where they're connecting a demand side of transportation seekers with a supply side of drivers. And it's really more of an exchange type business. Airbnb, the same thing with travelers and homeowners. But operating systems in general are also an example of this type of platform, where you have computer users who want to use software to solve some problem for themselves, and developers who have to make some investment of their time and energy and build applications to solve those problems. Very similar is Xbox or general gaming consoles and developers again, as well as an interesting one around standards themselves. If you think of the PDF portable document format standard, which is nearly ubiquitous across the web today, it started out in a very similar way as a demand side of people who wanted to consume high quality content and people who wanted to create content that allowed them to distribute that easily and have a wide access to a user base. And Google's another interesting one, where they have people who are looking for things, so searchers on one side, and a supply of people who are selling things on the other side. And lastly, credit cards are something we see every day, but oftentimes don't think of as a platform, where they're really connecting people who need to buy things with people who are selling things and making it easier. And one thing that's so fascinating about these types of businesses is that if you look at the infrastructure of our society, a lot of it is these sort of standards that allow lots of parties to come together and collaborate. And so if you look at just day-to-day life, your Wi-Fi, DVD, VHS, Bluetooth, phones in general, and phone cellular networks, the market listing service in real estate, the AC power grid. A lot of these things started with a demand side and a supply side, and took an incredible amount of energy and effort to get the market to sort of standardize on a single way of doing things. And there's tons more. There's a great article that HBR did called Strategies for Two-Sided Markets that I recommend. And maybe more interesting, or why you're interested in this, is that marketplaces and network orchestrators create some of the highest value and highest profit margins in a business, because once you reach this level of ubiquity and standardization, that you have a very defensible and monopolistic, in many cases, business. So why doesn't everybody do it? Well, it's because there's a significant problem in getting these things going, which is the chicken or the egg problem. Or really, it's that if you have an empty platform with no buyers and no sellers like this guy, then it's very hard to get these sort of flywheels in motion. And each of these users has their own sets of demand curves, but in the beginning you don't have any users on either side. And so what you need to do is to understand what are the dynamics that connect these two demand curves. And what we're optimizing for is creating these virtuous cycles, meaning it's like when buyers join the platform, so you get buyers coming to your retail shop, then sellers actually have a reason to come there and take their time and set up their things. And then once you have those sellers there, then that encourages more buyers to come and join. And when you have more buyers, then you can attract more higher quality sellers. And people who have studied these types of businesses have broke them down into the effects called network effects. You might have also heard of them as positive network externalities or demand-side economies of scale. And basically what that means is the value of the network increases as more people use the network. So a classic example is the phone network. If just you and one friend have a phone, then it's sort of valuable, but every additional person who buys a phone adds value to everyone else in the network. And so the network tends to grow exponentially. And this is also why we only have one phone system and you don't have to have 10 different phones in your house. And so a good quote around this is, with two-sided network effects, the platform's value to any given user largely depends on the number of users on the network's other side. Value grows as the platform matches demands for both sides. So what this looks like in practice is that you attract one side of the market, say buyers, which attracts sellers, which allows you to get more buyers, which allows you to get more sellers, which allows you to get more buyers, and so on and so forth. And this back and forth motion and ways of shifting the demand curves on either side or one side solely can be broken down into a couple of different effects: same-side network effects and cross-side network effects. And if we were to take some examples of those, we could look at positive cross-side network effects, or things like, say, a vendor wants to affiliate with a network with a large-scale customer bases. So with eBay, for example, lots of people want to sell there because there's tons of people buying there. And the same thing for developers who want to build software for an operating system, or for a new mobile platform, or for a new gaming system. They know that they can recoup their investment if they go to a platform that has lots of demand-side users. And this also applies on the negative side. So if you think of TV and radio as a platform, you have content creators and content consumers. If the platform controllers add too many ads in, then less viewers actually want to partake in that platform. And some positive examples on the same side network are developers want companies using the same language that they're familiar in because they're more employable that way. And gamers using game consoles want more people or more of their friends using the same console so that they can play together. And very commonly on the negative side, vendors want to be the only provider of their good or service in the platform so that they can maintain high margins with less competition. Similarly, if goods are scarce, shoppers prefer less competition, so they have a higher likelihood of attaining those goods. And another unique example is like exclusive clubs that have value based on how exclusive they are. Well, more people join. So if we look at each of these specifically with a demand curve perspective, we can start to compare the demand curve on one side of the market with the other. And so if a positive cross-side network effect, meaning you increase the quantity of users of buyers, then that shifts the demand curve out for the sellers and allows you to charge more. And the same thing with the negative side, if you have more ads, a higher quantity of ads, then your demand curve shifts in and you have less potential to charge money and less people that are interested. And for the same side network effect, if you have more gamers who attract more gamers that they want to play with, then that allows you to make more money. And the same thing for if you have too many sellers selling the same good or service, then they have a lower margin and they're willing to pay less to be on your platform. So we can start to build this mental model of how these types of effects apply broadly. And so in the next section, we'll talk about how do we use this understanding to build a growth strategy for a platform, utilizing subsidies, pricing, openness of the platform, and exclusive agreements, as well as look at risks that others have faced and how to model the system itself.